Well, hello, my dear friends, in Virtual Watch City. Yes, that's right, we've gone off into the Matrix. I always wondered if it was made of a bit of clockwork. This is Professor Cognome with you, and I'm so sorry that we only are able to meet this way this year, but remain highly optimistic that we'll be able to do something next year. At least I look forward to it. So, the theme this year, of course, is to the moon, but did you realize that Mr. Verne wrote an additional yarn beyond? It tells us what happened after the fact, and it is called Round the Moon. And we'll be reading a short section of it here. There's a preliminary chapter, but we'll skip to chapter 1, which begins the dramatic effect. Chapter 1, from 20 minutes past 10 to 47 minutes past 10 p.m. As 10 o'clock struck, Michael Ardan, Barbicane, and Nickel took leave of the numerous friends they were leaving on the Earth. The two dogs, destined to propagate the canine race on the lunar continents, were already shut up in the projectile. The three travelers approached the orifice of the enormous cast-iron tube, and a crane let them down to the conical top of the projectile. There, an opening made for the purpose gave them access to the aluminum car. The tackle belonged to the crane being hauled from the outside. The mouth of the Columbiad was instantly disencumbered of its last supports. Nickel, once introduced with his companions inside the projectile, began by closing by means of a long plate, held in position by powerful screws. Other plates, closely fitted, covered the lenticular glass, and the travelers, hermetically enclosed in their metal prison, were plunged in profound darkness. "And now, my dear companion," said Michael Ardan, "let us make ourselves at home. I am a domesticated man, and strong in housekeeping. We are bound to make the best of our new lodgings, and make ourselves comfortable. At first, let us try and see a little. Gas was not invented for moles." So saying, the thoughtless fellow lit a match by striking it on the sole of his boot, and approached the burner fixed to the receptacle, into which the carbonized hydrogen, stored at high pressure, sufficed for the lighting and warming of the projectile for 144 hours, or 6 days and 6 nights. The gas caught fire, and thus lighted the projectile looked like a comfortable room with thickly padded walls, furnished with a circular divan, and a roof rounded in the shape of a dome. Michael Ardan examined everything, and declared himself satisfied with his installation. "It is a prison," said he, "but a travelling prison, and with the light of putting my nose to the window, I could well stand a lease of 100 years. "Oh, you smile, Barbicane. "Do you say to yourself, this prison may be our tomb? Tomb, perhaps, still I would not change it for Mahomet's, which floats in space but never advances an inch." While Michael Ardan was speaking, Barbicane and Nickel were making their last preparations. Nickel's chronometer marked 20 minutes past 10 p.m., when the three travelers were finally enclosed within their projectile. This chronometer was set within the 10th of a second by that of the engineer. Barbicane consulted it. "My friends," said he, "it is 20 minutes past 10. At 47 minutes past 10, we will launch the electric spark on the wire which communicates with the charge of the Columbiad. At that precise moment we shall leave our spheroid. Thus we shall have 27 minutes to remain on the earth." 26 minutes, 13 seconds, replied the methodical Nichols. "Well," exclaimed Michael Ardan in a good-humored tone, "much may be done in 26 minutes. The gravest question of morals and politics may be discussed, and even solved. 26 minutes may, well employed, are worth more than 26 years in which nothing is done. Some seconds of a Pascal or a Newton are more precious than a whole existence of a crowd of raw simpletons." "Then, you everlasting talker," asked Barbicane. "I conclude that we have 26 minutes left," replied Ardan. 24 only," said Nickel. "Well, 24 if you like, my noble captain," said Ardan. 24 minutes in which to investigate." "Michael," said Barbicane, During the passage we shall have plenty of the most difficult questions. For the present we must occupy ourselves with our departure. Are we not ready? Doubtless, but there is still some precautions to be taken to deaden as much as possible the first shock. Have we not the water cushions placed between the partisan brakes, whose elasticity will sufficiently protect us? I hope so, Michael, replied Barbicane gently, but I am not sure. Ah, the joker, exclaimed Michael Ardan. He hopes, but he is not sure, and he waits for the moment when we are encased to make this deplorable admission. I beg to be allowed to get out. And how? Asked Barbicane. Humph, said Michael Ardan. It is not easy. We are in the train, and the guard's whistle will sound before 24 minutes are over. 20, said Nicholl. For some moments the three travelers looked at each other. Then they began to examine the objects imprisoned with them. Everything is in its place, said Barbicane. We have now to decide how we are to best place ourselves to resist the shock. Position cannot be in a different manner, and we must, as much as possible, prevent the rush of blood to the head. Just so, said Nicholl. Then, replied Michael Ardan, ready to suit the action to the word, let us put our heads down and our feet in the air, like the clowns in the grand circus. No, said Barbicane. Let us stretch ourselves on our sides. We shall resist the shock better that way. Remember that, when the projectile starts, it matters little whether we are in it or before it. It amounts to much the same thing. If it is only much the same thing, I may cheer up, said Michael Ardan. Do you approve of my idea, Nicholl? Asked Barbicane. Entirely, repeated the captain. We've still 13 minutes and a half. That Nicholl is not a man, exclaimed Michael. He has a chronometer escape at 8 holes. But his companions were not listening. They were taking up their last positions with the most perfect coolness. They were like two methodical travelers in a car, seeking to place themselves as comfortably as possible. We might well ask ourselves of what materials are the hearts of these Americans made, to whom the approach of the most frightful danger added no pulsation. 3 thick and solidly made couches had been placed in the projectile. Nicholl and Barbicane placed them in the center of the disc formatting the floor. There the 3 travelers were to stretch themselves some moments before their departure. During this time Ardan, not being able to keep still, turned in his narrow prison like a wild beast in a cage, chatting with his friends, speaking to the dogs Diana and Satellite, to whom, as may be seen, he had given sufficient names. Ah, Diana, ah, Satellite, he exclaimed, teasing them. So you are going to show the moon dogs the good habits of the dogs of the earth. That will do honor to the canine race. If ever we do come down again, I will bring a cross-type of moon dogs, which will make a stir. If there are dogs in the moon, said Barbicane. There are, said Michael Ardan, just as there are horses, cows, donkeys, and chickens. I bet that we shall find chickens. $100 we shall find none, said Nicholl. Done, my captain, replied Ardan, clasping Nicholl's hand. But, by the by, you have already lost 3 bets with our president, as the necessary funds for the enterprise have been found, as the operation of casting has been successful, and lastly, as the Columbiad has been loaded without accident, $6,000. 37 minutes, 6 seconds past 10. It is understood, Captain. Well, before another quarter of an hour you will have to count $9,000 to the President, 4,000 because the Columbiad will not burst, and 5,000 because the projectile will rise more than 6 miles in the air. I have the dollars, replied Nicholl, slapping the pocket of his coat. I only ask to be allowed to pay. Come, Nicholl, I see that you are a man of method, which I could never be. But indeed you have made a series of bets of very little advantage to yourself. Allow me to tell you. And why? Asked Nicholl. Because if you gain the first, the Columbiad will have burst, and the projectile with it, and Barbicane will no longer be there to reimburse your dollars. My stake is deposited in the bank at Baltimore, replied Barbicane simply, and if Nicholl is not there, it will go to his heirs. Ah, you practical men, exclaimed Michael Ardan. I admire you the more for not being able to understand you. 42 minutes past 10, said Nickel. Only 5 minutes more, answered Barbicane. Yes, 5 little minutes, replied Michael Ardan. And we are enclosed in a projectile, at the bottom of a gun 900 feet long, and under this projectile are rammed 400,000 pounds of gun cotton, which is equal to 1,600,000 pounds of ordinary powder. And the engineer, with his chronometer in hand, his eye fixed on the needle, his finger on the electric apparatus, is counting the seconds preparatory to launching us into interplanetary space. Enough, Michael, enough, said Barbicane in a serious voice. Let us prepare. A few instants alone separate us from an eventful moment. One clasp of the hand, my friends. Yes, exclaimed Michael Ardan, more moved than he wished to appear, and the 3 bold companions were united in a last embrace. God preserve us, said the religious Barbicane. God preserve us, said the religious Barbicane. Michael Ardan and Nickel stretched themselves on the couches placed in the center of the disk. 47 minutes past 10, murmured the captain. 20 seconds more. Barbicane quickly put out the gas and lay down by his companions, and the profound silence was only broken by the ticking of the chronometer, marking the seconds. Suddenly, a dreadful shock was felt, and the projectile, under the force of 6 billions of liters of gas developed by the combustion of pyroxide, mounted into space. Thus end Chapter 1. Well, my dear friends, a short read today, and only the beginning, but I do again hope that next year we shall read something live, and I also hope to offer you something of my own, a little bit more steampunk for the future. If you would like to hear more by Jules Verne, H.G. Wells of the time period, please go to LibriVox.com, which is a free site in which people, as you and I, average folk, record and leave for posterity some excellent copies of these public domain works. I wish you well, my friends. May your engines be full of good steam and your hearts remain light, and your imagination, that swiftest and best of airships, take you to the land of dreams and back safely. Until then, good night.